In this video, we're diving into a story that's both shocking and inspiring, a story about resilience in the face of discrimination. Picture this. A black woman, peacefully seated on a flight, is suddenly told by a flight attendant to move. What starts as a jarring moment of bias quickly spirals into something much bigger. Instead of accepting this mistreatment, she decides to take a stand. What unfolds next is a journey that transforms an act of discrimination into a powerful push for corporate accountability and change. Stay with us as we explore how one courageous individual turned a personal injustice into a movement that shook the airline industry to its core. This is a story of courage, empowerment, and a fight for what's right. You won't want to miss how it all unfolds. As the plane ascended, the woman sat in disbelief, replaying the moment in her mind. What had she done to warrant being singled out? Other passengers watched, some with silent empathy, others with indifference. She could feel the weight of every glance, every whisper. The flight attendant's request hadn't been about safety or protocol, it felt personal. Determined not to let this moment pass, she started documenting everything. She noted the flight number, the time, and the names she could gather. Her hands trembled, but her resolve strengthened with each detail she recorded. This wasn't just about her seat. It was about a pattern she had seen before, one she knew many others had experienced. When the plane landed, she knew her journey wasn't over. She had a decision to make: stay silent or speak out. Little did she know, her choice would set off a ripple effect that no one saw coming. Once home, she couldn't shake the incident. Her mind raced with questions. How many others had been made to feel small, to feel like they didn't belong? She reached out to friends, family, and even strangers on social media, sharing her experience and asking if anyone else had faced similar treatment. The responses poured in, each story more heart-wrenching than the last. It became clear that this wasn't an isolated event. It was part of a much larger issue. With every new message, her determination grew. She connected with advocacy groups and legal experts who had been fighting against discrimination in the airline industry for years. They provided her with guidance, and together, they began to craft a strategy. The goal wasn't just to get an apology, but to spark real change. Behind the scenes, the airline was scrambling. They had seen her story gaining traction, and they knew it could escalate into a PR nightmare. But for her, this was more than a public relations battle. It was a fight for dignity and respect. As her story spread, the momentum became unstoppable. Media outlets picked it up, and soon it was a national conversation. The airline's response was met with scrutiny, initially a generic statement about their commitment to diversity, which only fueled the public's outrage. People wanted accountability, and more importantly, they wanted change. She was invited to speak at conferences, to share her experience on panels, and to sit in meetings with airline executives. Every conversation, every interview added another layer to the growing pressure on the company. But behind her calm demeanor, she felt the weight of it all. The backlash was intense, with some questioning her motives, while others accused her of overreacting. Still, she pushed forward, knowing that this wasn't just about her anymore. It was about setting a precedent, about ensuring that no one else would have to endure what she did. The tension mounted as a deadline for the airline's official response loomed. All eyes were on them. What would they do next? Just when it seemed like the airline was ready to offer a resolution, another twist shook the narrative. A former employee, emboldened by her courage, came forward with internal emails that exposed a culture of bias within the company. The emails detailed instances where certain passengers were targeted based on their appearance and provided evidence that these discriminatory practices weren't just isolated incidents, they were systemic. The revelation hit like a thunderclap. What had been a single act of discrimination now appeared as part of a broader, more insidious issue. Public trust in the airline plummeted, and calls for accountability grew louder. She found herself at the center of a storm she hadn't anticipated. This new information intensified the conflict, making it clear that more was at stake than just a public apology. It was a fight to dismantle a flawed system. With the world watching, the pressure on the airline to make real, lasting changes had never been greater. As the airline scrambled to manage the fallout, they announced a major press conference. The world watched, expecting a formal apology and promises for change. And they got that, an apology, a pledge to overhaul their policies, and the resignation of key executives. It seemed like a victory, a moment of triumph for her and everyone who had supported her journey. But just as the dust began to settle, another surprise came to light. A coalition of employees revealed they had been secretly working alongside her all along. They had gathered evidence, spoken with advocacy groups, and helped shape the demands for change. This wasn't just her fight anymore. It was a movement from within, driven by those who had seen the injustice firsthand. The final twist wasn't the airline's concessions. It was the unity that had formed behind the scenes. Together, they had not only forced a corporate reckoning, but also ignited a cultural shift that would ripple far beyond the skies. In the aftermath, the airline implemented sweeping reforms, introducing mandatory diversity training and establishing a task force to monitor and address bias. Passengers began to notice the changes, and while trust took time to rebuild, the efforts were tangible. For her, the journey was transformative. What began as a painful encounter evolved into a catalyst for change, showing that standing up against discrimination can lead to powerful outcomes. She continued to advocate for fairness, using her experience to inspire others to speak out against injustice. The employees who had risked everything to support the cause found their voices strengthened, knowing they had made a difference. The story became a beacon, reminding everyone that change is possible when people unite for a common goal. As the plane wheels touched down on her next flight, she felt a sense of peace. She had turned a moment of adversity into a movement that would soar far beyond the clouds.